So, guys, we finally got a new prime minister. No longer do we have boring old Justin Trudeau. We have a Mark Carney. Nobody voted for him, though, except for 100,000 people maybe in the Liberal Party. What do you guys think about that? Anyways, how was you guys' weekend?
Was there a weekend?
Yeah, a little bit.
Didn't really feel like one.
What happened on it? I'm trying to remember.
Same old volleyball happened. It was okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bad for your knees. I don't know if I mentioned that.
He mentions it every day.
I do.
Yeah,
are
I don't
good.
play every day, but that's okay.
Knees are good.
For now.
And then what else? Nothing new and exciting.
Nothing really.
No.
The Jets won their game, I think, on the weekend.
They did.
yeah.
They won on Friday, and then they won again, I think, on...
But we couldn't, Adam, remember who did the Jets lose to since
Was
they
it the
won?
Rangers?
I don't know.
You can't remember either. Nobody
No.
remembers the
remember.
losses.
Loss is not important. They
Nope.
won 4 out of 5 since the trade deadline.
Yeah,
That's what's important.
What's important is they go into the playoffs
on a strong note.
Ooh,
without injuries.
don't say the P word. He's saying the P word.
Jinx us all we
Who
want.
said the P word?
He said playoffs.
Yeah.
Oh, he said the
Well, I know how it goes.
Come on now.
It's a little bit of ways yet.
That's like when we were at the game on Friday. I went with my sister, and she was like, "It's getting to third period." She's like, "Oh, he's going for the shutout." I was like, "Oh, damn it!"
Oh, no, you don't
Like,
do
you
that.
Don't do
Jinxed
that.
them.
You don't do that.
And she's like, "I'm sure it would be fine." And then 4 minutes left, they score. I was like, "God,
Way to go, Mike's sister. Way to go.
it was so."
I say all the inappropriate things right off the hop just to get it over with.
It was so.
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
He
Works
does do that.
works good.
Yeah.
Speaking of
I-
inappropriate things, Mark Carney.
Mark Carney is inappropriate? What do you guys think of that new guy that showed up here and then all of a sudden is the prime minister and went over to Europe and basically said, we are a European country?
He's the boss now.
Yeah,
He is the
sure
boss.
is.
I would have liked to say in whether or not he gets to be in charge.
You kind of get that
Not yet.
in a sense.
So I mean, as far as I understand, didn't he already this carbon tax? He kind of terminated it or something. like
Did
that,
he?
I
I'm
understand.
glad you brought that up, Mike.
Yeah.
That's what the news is telling us.
The news doesn't like to explain details. So
And they edit out what they did too.
what he did is he reduced the carbon tax to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is all they can do without a sitting government. I don't know if you guys noticed, we haven't had one in a while.
But Adam, I saw him sitting there Trump style and writing into a big like portfolio thing and putting his signature on it. Is that
impossible.
not exactly what he did?
Impossible. Everyone knows that Polyev is Trump,
Oh. But
and not Carney.
you're telling me that big old signature on that document wasn't anything?
It was an order in council.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Canadian version of an executive order. So that means it can be undone just as quickly as it was done. And the problem here is the carbon tax is written into Canadian law as legislation. And without a sitting government, you can't pass legislation, which means you can't remove legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So in spite of the fact that he's telling everyone that the carbon tax is gone, it is in fact still on the books. It is still law. He simply reduced it to 0% so that we aren't actually charged anything at the moment. He could just as easily increase it to whatever he felt like, just as easily as he reduced it to 0. So that's something we should all be aware of, and that's something that is not being made clear.
I'm glad that you said that because I personally feel, based off of experience with how governments actually perform, it's going to be the case. They are just going to make the promises, like I always say. They're going to give us all the beautiful promises now and say the things that we want to hear that will get them to vote for them and get their numbers to the point where they actually get in government again. And then when they have 4 or 5 more years, it's going to be the same old, and they don't really care. It's going to be whatever their ideology is. Would you say I'm being far too skeptical, Adam, or is that...
No, you're correct, because this isn't even his policy. This is not the Liberal policy at all. This is not actually what they want to do. They totally just jacked this from the Conservatives, the axe the tax idea, because they saw how popular that was. And so they axed their own stupid tax. And now they're telling us how great they are for doing that.
But not really. They just aren't enforcing it.
They put it they put it outside in the shed for a bit.
Yeah.
It's in the shed. It's a leaky shed. The roof leaks. It's not a good shed. Carbon tax is in there. They're perfectly ready to bring it back in at any time, and I believe they certainly will.
But I heard that this is just the consumer carbon tax.
The consumer carbon tax is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's all the carbon tax, as far as I can remember, was always referred to as the carbon tax until along comes Mr. Carney, and now everyone calls it the consumer carbon tax.
Mm-hmm.
And we should all be aware of that little detail because
Well, how come the media is not pointing that out?
when they add words like that, there is a reason for it. And it means, in this case, they're excluding something. And what are they excluding, Josh?
They're basically excluding the point where it is on us right now or not on us right now, but it was. And they'll probably just keep putting it on to businesses and industry.
The industrial carbon tax.
Yeah.
They are they have conveniently excluded that by saying consumer carbon tax. Now we can speculate what the conservative plan was when they said axe the tax, because they just talked about removing the carbon tax and they didn't specify consumer or industrial. They just said they were removing the carbon tax. So maybe their plan was to remove the industrial carbon tax as well. Maybe it wasn't. We don't know. They never said. But now we know for sure that Mark Carney is going to keep that industrial tax. And he is on record as having said that particular tax is in fact too low.
Oh, yeah.
And needs to be higher. And with it still, on the books and him deliberately excluding it from talk of removing the carbon tax, I fully believe that he is going to increase it as soon as we're not paying attention. And it's harder to quantify the effect of the industrial carbon tax because it tends to affect more the materials that things we buy are made out of. So it's really easy for them to bury that cost in the manufacturing cost of an item, and it's difficult for us to point it out and be like, hey, you're a government taxing this and making us pay more. It becomes very challenging for us to fight something like that. So that's probably why he likes it. He likes it better. And he himself has referred to it as a shadow carbon tax, which doesn't sound really on the level to me. So I don't think this is a good plan. I don't trust these liberals to remove their own tax that they brought in. And so far, they're just stealing other platforms temporarily, I think, just to get themselves reelected so they can continue ruining Canada once they're back in power.
I mean, is that not the political way?
Mm-hmm.
I made an observation recently. I watched the media, CBC in particular, talking about this carbon tax and how there's basically going to be no carbon tax election, blah, blah, blah. The observation I made while watching all these political pundits talking their heads off on CBC was they were talking entirely about carbon taxes and carbon economies and how we need to have a carbon tax program basically to save the environment like they always say. Mm-hmm. And how the conservatives have no plan and they're probably just going to scrap everything and then we're going to, like, the planet's going to die or whatever they extremists tell me that's going to happen if Canada doesn't have a carbon tax.
Canada's going to destroy the world.
And then they went on because Mark Carney went over to Europe and France instead of going to the US like normally happens with new prime ministers.
Sounds like a nice trip.
Yeah, probably was. The thing here is he was pointing out in economic deals that if we are to tie ourselves to the European Union or other countries like that, we need to have carbon pricing because all of those industries require it over there. It's a valid point. Here's the thing. My observation is he's just talking about carbon pricing and carbon taxes and reasoning for it. He's not talking about overall scrapping this carbon tax. So already outlined in the way that he is going about and talking to foreign leaders and talking about economics, he's talking about carbon tax. So that leads me just to extrapolate that what you said just is true. He is talking about it that has no tax to get elected, while at the same time when he goes out to other markets and jurisdictions with other leaders, he talks about the carbon tax. He's going to keep it. He's going to make it worse. And that is his priority. The media is talking about it and making a big deal about it. And I truly believe this is already the writing on the wall. We are just being manipulated right now so that the Liberal poll numbers go up. Is that the case, Adam?
Yeah, and on a large scale, it seems to be working just the way they want. The Liberals are back ahead somehow in the polls. It's mind-blowing and damn near depressing to see. But it looks like we are...
Luckily, we have a nice graph. Bring that up. Show us exactly what we're talking about. Angus Reid did a poll recently, very, very recently. So this is the most recent discussion, or not discussion, poll. There's some that are still have the Liberals slightly below, maybe 35%. But this is Angus Reid. I was watching that, what's her name, Sachi or whatever. She goes on all the shows and talks about the polling numbers that they have here.
Mm-hmm.
And look at that large growth from the desperate days of Trudeau to the current Mark Carney days. What do you think is the cause here, Adam? We talked about the reasons why people vote.
I think that people are just they're pinning all their frustrations on Trudeau, and they believe that now that he's gone, all the bad policies and decisions, all the scandals and everything that led us to strongly dislike Trudeau are gone with him, and it's an absolute fallacy. You have basically just put a different figurehead on the same pig, if you will, because he's picked essentially the same cabinet. He shuffled a few people around, gave them some different roles, a couple people in and out, but essentially all of these people in his cabinet were in Trudeau's cabinet. That means, and we have all the same MPs in the Liberal Party. So we have not changed the people that have been making the decisions and outlining the policy and pushing forth all these bad legislation, bad policy for years. We haven't changed them. We have all the same people. We have the same team behind him. And so they will continue to have the same agenda. They will spend some time pretending they don't, just to get through the election. Looks like it's working. They're already back ahead. So they'll change their tune for a little bit, and then once they're in power again, we will become very familiar with the song that they are playing.
I have a different outlook. I think the polling we saw, I don't disagree with you. I'll say that much.
You can disagree with me. I'll live.
I think what has happened is, to an extent, you are right, but to a greater extent, it goes back to what I said last time. People cannot change their vote very easily. There's a small amount of these radical centrists, and all these numbers that we've seen that led towards the Conservatives was just emotions. People really weren't interested in voting them. They have a left or right bias, and we're coming back to the constant numbers that Canadians have been seeing for the last few election cycles. And unless something drastic happens, I don't see there being much of a difference in the percentages. However, just to be clear, the way that this polling works is this is overall polling for all of Canada, and it's very dependent on the ridings and how it actually breaks down. So it ends up having to be that Conservatives need to have significantly higher numbers to get into government territory, because they are heavily have a heavy basis in Alberta, so it skews their numbers when they have a large amount of ridings that are 80% or more Conservative.
Or they would just have to win every riding in Toronto.
Yeah, that's the decision makers really there.
But that's usually what the Liberals do, and that's usually why we are forced to have their will imposed upon us.
Correct. They basically control the rest of Canada. It's called Upper Canada for a reason. And unfortunately, I think if you live in the West, you'll look to other options.
Yeah, they don't care. They just want to milk us for any money they can. So mostly that comes from Alberta, I guess. But to your point, I think right now we almost have we have multiple factors at play that are allowing people to just basically, go with their bias and shed any responsibility of making an informed decision. Instead, I think they're just, like I said, they're blaming all the issues they had with the Liberals on Trudeau, and they're saying that's gone because he's gone. And on the other side, people are just blindly falling into lockstep with the rhetoric that Polyev equals Trump, and if you vote conservative, you're voting for Trump. And obviously, as Canadians, the vast majority of us are not impressed with what Trump is doing right now and how he's treating our country and others. So I think it's really easy. If you, as you said, you don't want to change your vote, you just want to vote party all the time. It's really easy to just look at that situation and be like, well, I'm not voting for him because he's Trump. And so I don't have to think about this. I'm just going to keep voting for this party that's screwing everyone over.
Yeah, that is how low information voters vote, and unfortunately, it goes to a lot of them. It goes to what we said about policy versus party, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing here is, I also observed Carney speak a few times in the last couple of days here, and I gotta admit, he's not being offensive. He's being seemingly reasonable, and he's saying some of the right things, and that is both good and bad. It's good in the sense that if you actually believed him and if he was an actual honest man, you could trust that he would lead Canada in the right direction. The thing here is, I don't believe it, because he's already had a basis in the Liberal Party for the last 5 years helping to underwrite policy. So what we've seen in the last 5 years is at least part of what is his record. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, he again is saying one thing and it sounds great. It doesn't sound offensive at the very least. It may not sound like the best, but he's talking about developing Canada and getting the resources to market. All good things that conservatives normally say. But as you just said earlier in the podcast, he's basically stolen the conservative platform and he's running with his version of it. And if you believe that's what he's going to do, then whatever, you believe in anything.
It's temporary.
The thing is, it is temporary. He's going to go back to what his proven record is and what he's been doing. He's not going to change. People don't change like that. They have to be voted out in order to have a reckoning of the party and a rebirth of what they need to do. So I like the way he looks when he talks, and he isn't being offensive, and it's good for Canada. Unfortunate part is, this is everything he's doing is just to get actual voted and have a seat in representation here in government.
He has a weakness, though. A few reporters have found it.
Okay.
If he's asked about his assets that he put in a blind trust,
he is like a millionaire or billionaire.
He's got a lot of money. And he has a lot of money invested in a lot of Canadian companies. And as the Prime Minister of Canada, that can very easily put you in a situation where you're making decisions that could affect those companies positively or negatively, and that is a definite conflict of interest. And to that respect, he's been asked a few times now, what assets are in his blind trust, even though he's got it there and he's not controlling it. What is it? And he has basically now told us several times that he is not required to divulge that for, I believe, 120 days. And then he points out how he quickly put everything in a blind trust faster than he was supposed to. So that makes it all okay. But we don't know,
because he knew that he was going to be the prime minister.
Yeah, and we don't know what conflicts of interest he might have, and he's basically using a loophole to make sure there's no way for us to know that until after he either wins or loses an election, and it's too late for us to do anything about it. And he's been asked now by several reporters, and he gets, I think the term I've seen used now is snippy. Because he's frustrated with the question. He doesn't want to answer it. And we should all maybe wonder why. He's so worried about answering that particular question. I think it looks like he's hiding something. He's got something that he knows people won't like, and he doesn't want to talk about it, and he's frustrated that he keeps getting asked about it.
Well, that is frustrating. I mean, he's following the rules. That's the way the rules are set, and unfortunately, they're not always helpful to the average Canadian, because it's sometimes the people in power that get the kickbacks, and there's probably a reason that he's going to get some more kickbacks, because he has a bunch of businesses that him and Trudeau both deal with another country. You know what country that is? It's China. China, who has also, Michael Lee, did you know this? Slapped 25% tariffs on some of our goods. I don't see Carney or previously Trudeau getting all upset about those issues like they did with the Americans. I mean, sensically, it's because we've given all of our eggs into a basket of the Americans. However, these liberals are now constantly dealing with China and Chinese organizations, sometimes even Chinese criminals, apparently. And what does that say? Because these are stories on the news, in CBC, government funded. They're talking about this, right? Carney is not required to divulge any of that information. I'm sure what's going to happen is they're going to run through an election here as soon as we can, because the polling numbers look good, better than they've looked for the entire year for this party.
Oh yeah, by a lot.
And he doesn't have to divulge any information, so he's not going to be honest. He's going to be a regular old politician. He may have never been voted into anything in his life before, but he is a true dishonest politician.
I need to stop you right there,
Thank
Josh,
you.
because he has been sold to us as being not a politician, and we are being repeatedly informed that we should select him as prime minister, which, I don't know if you guys know this, is a job for a politician. He's being chosen for that because he's not a politician, and that's a good thing. And we should all be happy about that. Are you happy about that? Does that make any sense? Let me ask you this before you answer that question. Would you hire a mechanic to perform open heart surgery and be like,
sounds reasonable.
This mechanic is best for this surgery position because he's not a surgeon? Does that sound idiotic to you? It sounds pretty stupid to me.
We need to stop hiring politicians, really.
For surgery?
Especially for surgery. The thing here is, people get into these political positions and then they tell you the half-truths and a bunch of dishonest thing. And I'm sick of it. I went on a whole rant about it at the beginning of our last podcast about how they just give us promises. And I think that's all we get from these politicians, because they really do not care. They're idealists. They have a specific whatever it is that they want to accomplish, and it doesn't matter what's actually happening to the average Canadian. They aren't really representing you. If you are sitting there thinking, I want to vote Liberal, Conservative, Independent, because I just had an election that I got to vote in today. I thought about it because it didn't matter. I said, I'll just vote for anybody randomly, basically, because it's just one seat. But if you're sitting there thinking to yourself that these politicians actually truly care about you, I want you to sit there and ask, what exactly did they do that helped my life? Because if the answer is nothing or whatever, then probably don't vote for those people. Vote for anybody else. If you have a reason that was helped you in the last little while, and they make a promise to you to say, we're going to do one more thing that will help you, okay, then go vote for them. But this is my gripe about people here in Transcoda who vote for the NDP. They say they're the party for the working class. Well, what's the last thing that they did for the working class? Tell me exactly. If you're in the working class, what did they do? Okay, if they did something, vote for them again. If they didn't, vote for somebody else who has policy and has performance in what they're actually able to accomplish. Because right now, all I hear is promises, and I don't see any real, true accomplishments.
In defense, to play devil's advocate for this particular situation,
Go ahead.
the provincial Conservative Party, pretty weak right now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even have a leader. No idea what their platform is or what they stand for.
Mm-hmm. There's no election, though.
True.
Their
True.
job is to criticize the government.
Their job is to criticize the government. But when you're in a by-election and you're supposed to select someone, it might be cool to know a little bit of what they're.
Yeah, that's why I said it doesn't matter.
And your point is not necessarily lost. Basically, I think the election is, if you like what the NDP has been doing, vote for them, and if you don't, vote for whoever else, because whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's just wanted to make that one point.
Note taken. Well, is there any final thoughts on this Mark Carney guy, or should we wrap it up?
I just wish he was gone.
I hope for an election, and I hope for an election sooner. Mike, would you prefer to have an election and actually justify this guy who is prime minister right now?
I'm kind of with Adam on this whole thing. One time election, how's this guy gone already?
Yeah.
He just got here. I like him to be gone.
Don't like how he was assigned the position.
Yeah, it's I don't. Something doesn't feel right. And I don't know. I just think this was a bad idea, pretty much.
It doesn't feel right to me either. It sounds like it feels like an established coronation, as we said previously, for this guy. But let's let the voters decide. Bring on an election before the end of this next podcast, right, guys?
Yeah.
Just remember, when you're voting, if you ever get the chance, this guy got in through what is essentially a loophole, and now he's playing politics to a T, even though he's not a politician.
I disagree with that story entirely, but that is what we are being told, so listen to it if you like. And listen to us if you like. Share us with a friend. On that note, I'm saying bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
See you next week.
See ya.